Ask most students how they learn to spell a word, and the answer is almost universal. Write it out, again and again, until it sticks. It's one of the oldest study techniques in existence, and one of the least effective. If writing words out repeatedly worked reliably, spelling errors would disappear after a few practice sessions. But most students find the same words tripping them up week after week, test after test, no matter how many times they've written them. They're not being careless. The method is simply the wrong tool for the job. Today I'm going to explain exactly why repetition fails at the neurological level, and walk you through the NLP, visual anchoring method, that actually works. To understand why writing a word out 10 times doesn't work, we need to go back to how the brain stores information. All information, including spelling, is stored and retrieved through internal sensory representations, visual pictures, internal sounds, feelings. When a student writes out a word repeatedly, the primary sensory channel being engaged is auditory. As they write, they sound the word out internally, and that internal sound is what gets reinforced with each repetition. For words with consistent phonetics, this can produce passable results, but for the vast majority of English words, and countless words in other languages, phonetic sounding out actively misleads. Here's the clearest example: the word bought. B-O-U-G-H-T. 6 letters. Sounded out phonetically, it produces something like bought. B-A-W-T. 3 of those letters produce no sound whatsoever when the word is spoken. Auditory repetition will never reliably encode them. Because they make no sound, there's nothing to hear. This is not an edge case. English alone contains hundreds of words where the spoken form gives little or no reliable information about the written form. Students who rely on auditory processing for spelling are working with incomplete data, and their results reflect that. There's also a deeper problem. Auditory memory, particularly short-term auditory memory of the kind used in rote repetition, degrades under stress. The exam environment, which is exactly where accurate spelling is most needed, is also the environment where this type of memory is least reliable. Students who knew a spelling in practice frequently find it evaporates in the exam room. This isn't a concentration failure. It's a predictable consequence of using the wrong memory system. The NLP spelling strategy works on an entirely different principle. Rather than reinforcing the sound of a word, it builds a clear, stable visual representation of the word in the mind. A mental image that can be looked at, read, and verified. In exactly the same way a student would read a word written on a page. The process involves constructing a vivid internal image of the complete word. Every letter, in sequence, clearly visible in the mind's eye. Once that image is properly formed and anchored, the student can retrieve it on demand. And because visual memory is stored differently from auditory memory, it remains accessible even under the kind of pressure that causes auditory recall to fail. The most striking demonstration of how well this works is what happens when students use it correctly. They can spell the word backwards. I want to sit with that for a moment, because it sounds surprising. With phonetic repetition, spelling backwards is essentially impossible. You cannot meaningfully sound out a word in reverse. There's nothing to work with. But with a clear visual anchor, spelling backwards is simply a matter of reading the image from right to left. The letters are all there. The student just reads them in reverse order. The ability to spell a word backwards is not a party trick. It's proof that the information has been stored visually and is genuinely accessible, not approximately remembered, but precisely retrievable. This is the key distinction between the two methods. Repetitive writing produces approximate familiarity. The word looks vaguely right or vaguely wrong. Visual anchoring produces exact knowledge. The student can see the word clearly and read every letter from that mental image, regardless of pressure or distraction. The visual anchoring method is particularly powerful for the categories of words that defeat phonetic approaches entirely. Silent letters, the G and H in bought, the K in knife, the W in right. These letters are invisible to auditory processing, but they're fully present in a visual image. Students who use the visual method encode these letters as part of the picture. They're never tempted to leave them out, because they can see them clearly. The same principle applies to irregular spellings, words borrowed from other languages, technical vocabulary, and any word where pronunciation gives a misleading guide to spelling. The visual method handles all of them equally well, because it doesn't rely on sound at all. It encodes the word exactly as it appears on the page, every letter in sequence, and stores that image for retrieval. One of the most significant findings from the research behind LAS is that visual anchoring works for any word in any language, and this makes complete sense once you understand why. Languages vary enormously in how consistently they map sound to spelling. Finnish and Spanish are highly phonetic. Spelling largely follows pronunciation. English and French have complex systems with numerous exceptions. Mandarin uses characters. Arabic uses a different script entirely. The visual method sidesteps this variation completely. It encodes what the word looks like, not how it sounds, which means the exact same internal process works for an English irregular verb, a French borrowed word, a Mandarin character, or an Arabic term. This universality was one of the early indicators in the LAS research that these strategies were tapping into something fundamental, something about how the human brain processes information that doesn't change depending on the language being learned. The NLP spelling strategy is not age-restricted or subject-restricted. A 7-year-old learning basic sight words and a 17-year-old preparing for advanced exams are using the same underlying cognitive process when they read. The visual method works for both, and for everyone in between. For students who have struggled with spelling throughout their schooling, this method is often revelatory. Words they have written out hundreds of times and still consistently misspelled can be encoded correctly in a single properly conducted session. I want to be clear, that's not an exaggeration. It's a consistent result observed across more than 20 years of application in the institution where the LAS methodology was developed. And the implication of that is important. Spelling difficulty is almost never a sign of a learning problem. It is almost always a sign of a method problem. Give a student the right method, and the difficulty disappears. In the LAS app, the visual anchoring method is built into the vocab builder. When teachers or parents assign vocabulary words, students work through a structured step-by-step process that encodes each word visually, confirms genuine understanding of its meaning, and locks in the spelling, all in a single focused session per word. The Easy AI is available throughout to help if a student gets stuck. Words learned this way are retained far more durably than words practiced through repetition. And the method applies to every subject, from English spelling lists to science terminology to foreign language vocabulary. Here's what I want you to take away from today. The reason spelling is hard for so many students is not that they're not trying hard enough. It's that they're using a method that works against how the brain actually stores written information. Switch from auditory repetition to visual anchoring, and spelling changes completely. Not over weeks, often in a single session. The full step-by-step spelling strategy, including the technique for building and testing a stable mental image, is taught free in the Learning Strategies section of the LAS app. The Vocab Builder, which applies it to any vocabulary, is available with a subscription. Download the Learning Anything Strategies app for free from the Apple or Google stores. And if you know a student who writes words out 10 times and still gets them wrong, share this with them. This is what actually works. I'll see you in the next one.